Hello and welcome to the Business of Story. I'm Park Howell. Now, if you find yourself struggling in business and or in life, you're in luck because today's guest demonstrates that without struggle, your risk of failure goes way up. And he'll share what he calls his handful of principles that will empower you to overcome most anything and everything. But first, a question. Are you struggling with your storytelling? Is your business communications falling flat? Do you find it difficult to connect with and convert customers because your messaging seems to excite, no one, no matter how hard you try? I can help you overcome this struggle. As you may know, my typical Business of Story training is with iconic brands like the Home Depot, Walmart Canada, the U.S. Air Force, Dell, Banner Health, etc., and their large internal teams. But a lot of people have asked me for a mastery course for themselves and or one or two of their people. So I've launched a new public version of our 4-week deliberate practice program starting immediately. This is designed for entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, and small to mid-sized companies that want to grow as confident, persuasive, and influential communicators through our mastery course. And get this, it's only $250 per person. You'll first take the ABTs of Agile Communications quick online course so that you can use this messaging marvel immediately in your work. And I'll ask you to email me one of your ABTs so I can give you some personal one-on-one coaching in building it. Then I'm going to host a live, incredibly interactive virtual 90-minute training on Thursday, June 1 at 10 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time, where you will share your ABTs with the group and learn from your other fellow attendees. A week later, on Wednesday, June 7th at 10 a.m. PDT, I'll host a follow-up Ask Me Anything 60-minute virtual session where you will continue to hone your storytelling skills. Now, the ABT is short and sweet, but tricky, so it takes practice, practice, practice. You'll also get your free digital copy of the Narrative Gem for Business, which will be your companion guide to help you craft powerful ABTs long after the training is over. Plus, you'll become an exclusive member of our Story Prompt Campfire, where you can share your ABTs and comment on your fellow cohorts' ABTs using this incredible audio-video tool. And finally, you might even be invited right here with me on the Business of Story to share your journey with the ABTs of storytelling. Now, I've limited this public ABT mastery course to just 25 participants, and it's, of course, on a first-come, first-served basis. That way, we can keep it intimate, and I can do some really solid one-on-one coaching with you and everyone else in your cohort. And get this, I will guarantee its success 100%, or you get your money back. And you get to keep all the knowledge and storytelling skill in the process. I make this 100% guarantee because I just know how powerful the ABT messaging marvel is to help you become a confident, persuasive, influential storyteller in all of your sales, marketing, business, branding, leadership, communications. So, just visit our website at businessofstory.com, click on the pop-up, and enroll in the ABTs of Business Storytelling training today. It will revolutionize how you communicate because, after all, our ultimate goal here at the Business of Story is to help you excel through the stories you tell. Enroll today. I would love to have you there. Today's guest knows about struggle. In fact, he attributes all of his success to his early struggles as a child, diagnosed with 7 neurodivergent conditions, including autism, synesthesia, and dyslexia. But he believes these so-called deficits are actually his superpowers that have enabled his remarkable success, including selling 2 of his startups to eBay as part of a $925 million transaction. Gregory Shepard says that he and folks just like him simply see and experience the world a little or a lot differently than the rest of us, and their struggles actually provide a decided advantage in business.
For me, that has created some of my superpowers, because I think when everybody looks at a fence, just to give you an analogy, they see like this fence, but I see through the slats in the fence and to what's behind it. I think most people, because everybody's looking at things the same, it means that there are empty spaces of opportunity that people don't see, but I only see those. So when I'm looking at the world, I see these spots that nobody's in business. I see them and I'm like, I can't even believe to myself a lot of times. I'm like, how has this even been missed? And how has nobody caught this? But autistic people catch that. People like Elon Musk and Steve Jobs and Richard Branson and Einstein, and you could go on and on, that these are neurodivergent people, most of them autistic, that have seen these spots because we're the only ones that could see them because we have a different operating system.
Gregory Shepard is a 20-year startup veteran and a serial entrepreneur with 14 liquidity events under his belt. He is a Forbes book author who has also written over 100 articles published in 25 national and international publications. A TEDx speaker and keynote speaker for universities, associations, and conferences worldwide, his talks inspire the masses. And he is the host of the Forbes Radio Meet the Boss podcast. Gregory co-founded Boss Capital Partners, a global syndicate for investing in tech startups. He also co-founded Boss Startup Science with a learning center based on the University of San Diego campus. He developed the Business Operating Support System, or BOSS, B-O-S-S, as an open-source methodology to empower entrepreneurs while increasing startup success. On this episode, you'll learn how Gregory went from selling rattlesnakes to make money in his teens to selling to eBay for north of $900 million. Why every startup should go through his 7 phases when building a business to sell, and what you can learn from those who think differently. Gregory says, quote, "As a neurodivergent autistic, my story applies to all those who struggle, which is all founders. I use my stories of struggle and success to bring knowledge to those founders." So please welcome to the Business of Story, a man who lives in San Diego with his wife, 2 children, and his pot-bellied pig, Winnebago, Gregory Shepard. Gregory, welcome to the Business of Story.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
It was an absolute delight to meet you a couple weeks ago up in Whistler, Canada. We were both up there for the ACE Tech Leadership Conference, and big shout out to Kathy Troop that put on an absolutely amazing show. And I also got to give a big shout out to my good friend Alice Hyman, who referred me in. So I got a chance to come in and speak for the first time at ACE Tech and meet incredible people like you. And so it was just so much fun. And I'm glad you're able to take the time to be on the show with us today to talk about the struggles in your life and how you have not just overcome them, but you've actually leveraged them, haven't you, to your benefit in building some remarkable businesses and now out there helping a lot of startups and entrepreneurs do their thing. So I'm honored to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
So give us a little bit of background for those listeners and viewers that don't know you. Give us, a little bit about how do you find yourself where you are today?
I have autism and dyslexia, synesthesia, and savant syndrome. And when I was young, everybody told me I wasn't going to be anything and that I should go dig ditches and stuff, which I did for a little while. And then I decided that I was more than that, and I started trying to figure out ways to do business, because I had sold Rubik's Cubes and I sold rattlesnakes. I used to catch rattlesnakes and sell them. And I did a lot of stuff when I was younger, that were sort of like a little entrepreneur. And then what I did is I joined the Navy because I thought, well, maybe this is a way to get me out, But then I got kicked out of the Navy because I lied about asthma, and a few other, like my autism and dyslexia and stuff. And I had $133.77. I remember walking out of the gates with that. I started off working 3 jobs. So I was working graveyard as a security guard. I was working in the morning, waiting or bundling up newspapers for the newspaper delivery people at a warehouse. And then I would spend the evenings waiting tables. In the day, I would work on my business or whatever business I had going on at that time. And over a long time, I got to the point where I had 12 startups and 12 exits, 4 private equity awards for transactions between 250 and $1 billion. I have a book coming out this year and a TED Talk I did in 2020. And since I was little, I would always try to do those things that I felt like were impossible. So when I was 18, the first, I call them quests, the first quest I did was to try to graduate from high school. And since then, I've done one every year. I mean, a lot of different things. I've wrestled alligators and swam with great whites, drove a Indy car, climbed El Capitan, done, 39, 14,000 foot mountains. There's so many things. I ran a marathon. I swam a marathon last year. I've ridden a bicycle 525 miles in a week. Just all kinds of different things, just basically, I think that it's good for the mind and the body to struggle. I think it's critical for survival. And I've studied this a little bit. Like if you look at plants, you can see that the plants that have experienced struggle are those that thrive. And you can see that the body, if the body struggles, it goes through autophagy, which is where the bad cells are digested by the good cells and producing more good cells. But these things only happen when there's struggle present. When things are not struggling, they eventually die. So I thought, okay, well, struggle is good. So then I started, instead of hiding from it or avoiding it, I face it head on.
Well, there's a lot to unpack here. So number one, you were just talking about the plants. And it's funny because we have Lacey up here, who is doing a whole bunch of landscaping for us. We built a home a couple of years ago in Flagstaff area, just south of Flagstaff. And we were just now getting around to landscaping it because we want to live here for a while to see how we liked it, and what we were going to do with it. Well, she put in a bunch of trees last week and the wind was blowing, 20, 30 knots. It was crazy, Gregory. And she had one little stick down the trunk to hold it in place, and that thing was bending way over. And I asked her, I go, shouldn't we really be staking those off? I'm afraid they're going to get blown right out of the ground. And she said the exact same thing you did. She goes, no, we don't want little weak trees out here. They got to struggle. They got to fight this wind up here. It's going to grow stronger roots. It's going to grow a stronger base, and they'll become way more resilient, she said. She goes, it's just like raising your kids. If you give them too much stuff, they're not going to be resilient. They got to struggle a little bit. And I cracked up. So, exactly. It's a terrific metaphor.
Yeah, it's a big, big deal. I find when you work out, your muscles get bigger when you struggle. When you run, your lungs get stronger when you struggle. The only time you get stronger is when you struggle. So to me, struggle is like a critical component of survival, especially if you're like an underdog. Especially if you have things that are, difficult for you. Struggle is like the critical component that makes it so that you can pass up other people that don't have those disadvantages,
Is it fair to say that you grew up a bit of an underdog, and in that you were diagnosed with all of these different situations in your life and in your brain and whatever? Number one, when did they start thinking, we better get Gregory checked out? What were you doing that said, this guy's a little bit different than the average individual out there? And then what did that mean when they started giving you those diagnoses? Did you repel back from them? Was it a victim mentality, or how did you learn to start actually using them in your favor?
When I was born, I had 9 blood transfusions, and my heart stopped and my breathing stopped twice, so I was pronounced dead. And somehow they pulled me back, and I, was in the hospital a lot, quite like all the time, pretty much until I was like 14. And then after that, they started to notice things because I wasn't talking until I was older and things like that. And apparently, I was diagnosed with all of these things, but my mom didn't want me to know because she didn't want me to be put into like a box. So instead, the all of them except for synesthesia and autism were okay. Were on my my ADOS, my IEP statement. But then when I got older and I was like 30 and my mom passed away, then I went in and found this folder and it had all the other stuff. So then I went to three other doctors because I didn't believe it. So I went to all these doctors and I kept, psychologists and psychiatrists and MDs, and I kept asking, how could this, is this real? Like, is this stuff actually happening? And they were like, yeah, I mean, you're, so then I went and got three more diagnoses. And then I was like, okay, I guess this is real, And then I sat with it for a long time, and then I did the TED Talk. And the TED Talk was sort of like coming out on the whole thing. And I was terrified. I thought people were going to make fun of me and stuff like they did in school, And when I was growing up, to your question, I was a huge underdog, right? I mean, I was never allowed to do PE because of asthma. I was in special ed, which is where they, march you down to these old trailers, and kids called me names, and I got beat up quite a bit. So it was really, really, really rough.
When did it change? That's hard for anybody to overcome, but at some point there must have been a moment in your life that you said to yourself, I could use these as an excuse not to go out in the world and do things, or I can leverage them as your own version of a superpower or superpowers to go out and do the amazing things in business you have done.
Well, I had tried to live the other way, right? So I had, during high school and even after high school for quite a bit, I was really trying to sort of avoid situations that I felt uncomfortable, which is a lot of situations. And I would also try to just not do things that it's sort of like when the doctors, you go to a doctor. I was at the doctor the other day, and I was like, they're like, well, does that hurt? And I'm like, yeah. And they said, okay, well, don't do that, And I thought to myself, that's the opposite of the approach I've taken, right? With all of these things, is that if I feel like something is really hard for me, I go right to that thing and I do it until it's not hard. And some things are always hard. But if you turn, it's sort of like, they talk about headwinds and tailwinds. And I always think about, if you turn your sails, a headwind can become a tailwind. And so I just aim my sails in a different direction and I catch the wind and then I use it to push me forward. It's a struggle sometimes to do that. It's a struggle to actually turn your sails, right? It's really, really hard to do. But if you're successful in doing it, then, it's almost like the universe kind of pushes you forward, kind of moves you forward. But as long as you're hiding from something, then you stay in one place. It's like the decision to fall down may be an accident, but the decision to stay down is a decision, right? So, I never stay down. I get up and I go and I keep going, and and as I get older too, it's like, you get sore and you have, problems with your joints and things like that. And I just keep going, and I feel like it gets easier and easier. Your threshold for taking on things that make you anxious or taking on things that make you uncomfortable or physically hurt or whatever, those things, your threshold goes up more and more and more. And because of that, you get more powerful. Even if you aren't actually more powerful, you really are actually more powerful, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it totally does. I mean, we talk about all the time, no struggle, no story. So yeah. You've got to go through this. Let's talk about your first real big win. And I think it was a software company. You ended up, selling it to eBay for over $900 million or something like that. Can you give us that backstory, and how did you use some of your superpowers to build what you built and had such a successful exit with it?
Yeah, when you build businesses, for me, a lot of it is there's different pieces that you have to understand. The first thing is that there are subject matter expertise and there are visionary expertise, right? There are entrepreneurs that are really good visionaries. They can see what's going on and what's going to happen in the future. people like Elon Musk and Steve Jobs, and then you have those that are more subject matter experts, meaning they're in so deep down an inch wide, mile deep trench that they have expertise past the roots that everybody else is aware of, like you, right? So when you have, I think what's given me an advantage is because I have this autism and I have this synesthesia and all of these things. So I've had to constantly sort of reshape the way my brain thinks. I've had to create new neural pathways. I've had to sort of, build areas of my brain, and stuff like that. So
how did you learn how to do that?
well, I mean, neural pathways are just, well, they already know, if you think about something over and over, the neural pathway gets bigger. It's like driving cars down. It starts out as a trail and then enough walking and it becomes a big paved trail and then it becomes a freeway if you do it enough, right? That's the idea of meditation, and, sports athletes do it, and, it's a major thing. So a scientific proven fact. Sometimes they talk about religious people that pray over and over and over and over and over and over, and they're building that neural pathway in some of the countries. And then you can't, your brain is controlled by your thoughts. So instead of my thoughts being things that I don't want them to be, therefore controlling things I don't want, I took control of it myself and started thinking about what I want instead of what I don't want. And so I said, I don't want to be afraid of this. I don't want to, be held back because of asthma. I don't want to be held back because of, dyslexia or whatever. So I wrote a book, with dyslexia. I read it like a fourth grade level, I write it like a fifth grade level. And I have a book coming out, a real publisher published a book, they paid me for it. It's crazy.
What's the title of it?
Startup Science.
And what's it about?
It's about this study I did. So one of the things I did, I went into politics for a little while and I became a chairman for congressional candidates. I was trying to get women in, other than people that look like us. So other than white dudes, I was trying to get into Congress. And in that period of time, I found out that only 4% of people have the ability to get out from check to check living. But the majority of those people do it by starting a business, but then 90% fail trying to start a business. So I said, okay, I'm going to figure out how I can help that 90%, because those are the people that tried, right? So I went out and studied it for 5 years. I spent $500,000 on the research, and then I wrote the book about what I learned to try to help founders. And then I built a school also called Startup Science, which startupscience.io, which is in the school, in the universities, and that sort of thing. So with the idea of trying to help. So
let's go back to your original startup then, the one that you took off and sold for a lot of money.
Yeah. So this is, back in the, before Google, before most people remember when the internet was just getting started, I just was like in love with the internet. I was like, this is amazing. You can do anything here. It's just incredible. Anything you come up with, you can do. And so I started trying to build websites for people during the gold rush. I was trying to make it more automated. So we built this software that made it so people could drag and drop images themselves and write in text. It was like the first Wix.
So when is this, like 1990s, mid-90s, something like that? Before the
like
dot-bomb?
The early 90s.
Okay.
This was before any of the automatic website builders. It was the first of its kind as far as I know. But everybody kept coming up to me and they were like, okay, well, we bought the website, but there's no traffic. And I used to tell people, yeah, it's like you have a store in the middle of the desert, right? There's nobody knows who you are, or you have no frontage, no cars driving by. You're just out there in the middle of nowhere. So I said, well, you need to start getting yourself some exposure. And the way you do that is by starting to link in with search engines. And so this is like Yahoo's just getting started, and they were all dependent on links. Back then, what you would do is you would trade links, right? So somebody would have a link, you would have a link, and they would have these pages called link pages. And if somebody found you on that link page and they bought something, that was just part of the process. So what I did is I said, how about if I pay you to put me in a more prominent place instead of just buried on your links page? And they were like, okay. So then we had to write software in order to pay people, to keep track of it and pay people. And then that was the start of the affiliate industry. So I started the first agency. I was the first one to go global and the first one to be acquired by eBay. So that business took me 17 years, because we had the dot bomb, which was a huge step back, the 2008 recession, which was another huge step back. And I had a couple of bad team members that made some, stole some money and stuff. And so I had to fight through all that. So it took me a long time. And I made some of the classic mistakes that I now write about. But then it eventually sold to eBay. And then 6 months later, I sold another company to eBay while I was working there. So I build more than one company at a time. And I had built this other company at the same time. And I was actually trying to hide it from them because it wasn't ready to be acquired. I could get more money for it if I had sat on it a little longer.
And what kind of company was it?
It was Ad Compliance.
Okay.
So basically, all these brands were going crazy and making all this money on affiliate, but there was a lot of these affiliates that were breaking rules, like buying their keywords, basically beating the brands to their own traffic and then getting credit for them. And so ad compliance was a big thing that I saw coming. So I built an ad compliance company, and we were our first own customer, and then we started working with other agencies, and then they bought the whole thing. And then I became chief strategy officer to get all of it, all the 14 companies and the 2 that they bought from me, and then another one, all integrated, either sell them off or integrate them or whatever. And then I became CTO to actually handle the technology of the creation that I had visualized.
So you were chief strategy officer and then CTO at eBay?
At eBay Enterprise Marketing Solutions.
Yeah. And that's the eBay we all know, correct? The online shopping?
Have, like any other company, they have all these big divisions, right? So that was one of the divisions. We ended up buying the whole division from them.
Yeah.
And selling off pieces and merging it all together and then selling it again. So it was...
So then, Gregory, come back to, everything that you have been diagnosed with, autism, synesthesia, did I say that right? And what is that exactly?
So there's 2 different types of ways that this affects me. Everybody has different things. But for me, colors carry sort of they cover emotion. So purple is a color for me, green is a color for me, red is a color for me. They all mean things. And almost like they cause me to have physical feelings. So red makes me sort of like almost frustrated, angry, negative, that sort of thing. And green makes me inspired and really excited. And the different variables of each color have things too. And then I see things sometimes like 3-dimensional. So when you're looking at something, it'll look 2D from your angle, even if it's 3D, but you'd have to get behind it to see the other side, right? They sort of come out at me, so I kind of see things more like a 3-dimensional thing. And so when I think, a lot of times, the way I process things is almost like a bunch of shapes and colors in sort of like in the sky, and then each one of those things mean things to me. So they're like, sometimes there's these capsules, and I can open up the capsule and pull out data inside of it that I use. So it's like a whole it's like a whole thing. When I was younger, I thought it was crazy. Oh my God, I'm crazy because I'm seeing these things, And then finally I got the diagnosis, and I was like, okay, I'm not crazy. This is actually a thing.
This is a thing.
Yeah.
What does the color blue do for you?
Blue, if it's a light blue, then it's more like young kids. A sort of thing, yeah, like kids playing. It's a nice feeling. Dark blue is more like a family, like my mom, sort of like a blue. Purple is like my mom and people that I love, my wife, stuff like that. It's a whole array of like colors that, and I had to really pay attention to this. I didn't even know. I just would see, like when I'm driving, I'll see brake lights at night. And it would make me really crazy. So now I just don't drive at night when I see brake lights, or I'll close my eyes and my wife will drive. It's an interesting dynamic of like the colors and the representation of the colors. Like a lot. I have like my eye drops are green. My glasses cleaners are green. Like most of the stuff I have, all my companies have always been either green or purple. So, that's just it's an emotion. I don't know how to explain it, but
Well,
it's also,
I'm wondering, like with autism, of course, there's a spectrum on it.
yeah,
And, you're on that spectrum. A lot of people argue, are on the spectrum somewhere, right?
yeah,
And if someone's leveled it way up to, 9, 10, 11, then you have more challenges with it. I'm wondering, too, if the synesthesia, again, if I'm saying that right, is the same sort of thing that we all will bring in colors. I mean, I love red. Red is my favorite color. I don't know
yeah.
why. It, to me, it is that caution side, but it's also like, let's go do this thing,
Huh.
And so I'm wondering if, with what you experience, is just a way heightened experience with color that we all are. And I asked that, I throw that out there because, and you saw the training I did at Ace Tech, and I'm using the and, but, therefore, and that statement of agreement we always like to do with blue, because we learned when we were coaching this to very, very bright scientists that they had a better handle on what the different functions were of the and, but, therefore. So that statement of agreement is always blue because we call it the kumbaya color. We want us to all agree this is what our vision is and this is what we hope to, gain together. And then that but statement of contradiction is red. It's like, stop, wait a minute. And like you said, your reaction to red is very, oh my God, it could be, so that red is, here's the problem that we have to solve for. And then the green, in that therefore statement of consequences, here's what we need to do next. Here's that green light. Here's the action we need to take in order to get what we want in our statement, of agreement. So I think that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the way that a lot of people don't understand what the spectrum is or how it actually works. So if you can imagine a bunch of, like, let's say that you had a bunch of colored pencils and you drew straight lines right next to each other from left to right. Each one of those lines would be a certain neurodivergent condition, right? So it could be taste sensory, smelling sensory, vision sensory, touch sensory, hearing sensory. It could be tics, what we call tics, which are stimulation, jerk, like things that happen to you where you have this inside thing that comes up and starts getting you. There are a lot of things that have to do with social circumstances, but it's not what people say. There's so much crap out there about autism. It's unbelievable. And a lot of people say, oh yeah, well, we all are on the spectrum. When people say that, honestly, it undermines what we're going through. It's like, oh, we're all on the spectrum. Oh, really? Did you go to high school? Can you go to the movies? Can you go to a bar? Can you go to a dinner party? Can you go to a fair? No, come on. Right? Like, it's just not, it's like somebody saying, walk into somebody in a wheelchair and saying, oh yeah, I sprained my ankle once. It's not the same, right?
That's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it undermines us. It really kind of upset, we're like, really? So you're suffering like I don't think so. There's a big difference. Each line, though, represents a different neurodivergent condition. Autism is where you have all of them, not one of them. One of them is a sensory disorder or a general processing disorder or one of those things, right? All of them is dyslexia. All of them is autism. And dyslexia is a different one. Synesthesia is a different one. And savant syndrome they're different. Those are outside of autism. But collectively, they're all called neurodivergent. But, about 25% of people that are in the entrepreneur space are neurodivergent of some sort, right? So that's like ADHD, AD, dyslexia, any of the individual things, right? So I think that's what people are talking about, right? They're like, oh, I have this one thing. And you're like, okay, well, then you have one thing.
Gotcha.
There's this effect that they call the entourage effect, which is where, if you have one sensory thing, so your maybe sensory thing is taste, it could be any of your senses, right? But if you're autistic and you have all of them, and what autism is there isn't like somebody is worse than somebody else. That is a misnomer. Like, it isn't like, they have these levels, but it's how it's basically based off of noticeable. like noticeable conditions that you have, So noticeable, I'm one, right? Which is needs support. But some of those lines, some of those colored lines are at the top, and some of them are at the bottom. And because the spectrum is so huge, both in vertical and horizontal ways, every autistic person is different. Like you meet one, you've met one, you know. So it's it's a very difficult thing for anybody to sort of track down. But one thing that is true, to your point, is that autistic people have between 7 and 10 times more activity in their frontal lobes, so where the senses are: vision, taste, smell, touch, and hearing. So a lot more is going on there. But we also have a lot more thinking going on. There's a lot of constant processing going on. That thinking is supposed to be stimulated based on the constant stimulation that you get from your senses. So it's like one thing trails another thing, and then it creates this entourage effect. And I think personally that for me that has created some of my superpowers, because like I think when everybody looks at a fence, just to give you an analogy, they see like this fence, but I see through the slats in the fence and to what's behind it. So I think in my case, I think most people, because everybody's looking at things the same, it means that there are empty spaces of opportunity that people don't see, but I only see those. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So when I'm looking at the world, I see these spots that nobody's in business. I see them and I'm like, I can't even believe to myself a lot of times. I'm like, how has this even been missed? And how has nobody caught this? But autistic people catch that. People like Elon Musk and Steve Jobs and Richard Branson and Einstein, and you could go on and on, that these are neurodivergent people, of most of them autistic, that have seen these spots because we're the only ones that could see them, because we have a different operating system. It's not better, it's not broken, it's just different. And because of that, it's like looking through the world through different glasses, if that makes your lenses are different. Does that make any sense at all?
It completely makes sense, and when we got a chance to chat up in Whistler a little bit, I could start seeing in your words and what you were describing of your business and so forth, that you do definitely see the world differently than a lot of us. And I guess that really goes to your success, and you're able to get out in front of the public in business and say, hey, here's the next big thing coming up. And you've had a lot of success doing that. And now you are working with and teaching other people, entrepreneurs and startups, maybe how to ride your coattails in some respects with that superpower of what to look for. You've got this BOSS system and this startup science system. Can you talk a little bit more about what that is all about and how you are helping these other companies?
So when I started building business, I started studying what I call operating systems. So this is like Lean, Six Sigma, Agile, 40X, OGSM, all of those things, right? Toyota Production System, all the way back to the beginning, anything that anybody had ever built. And so BOSS is the business operating support system, which basically, if you look at all these different operating systems that are out there, they're part of them are good for different parts of the life cycle of a founder. So the first thing, there's a collision between what needs to be done and when it needs to be done, because you can do the right thing at the wrong time or the wrong thing at the right time, right? And so time is an important element. So first I created the life cycle, which it was the timeline of a startup. So from I have an idea to exit, how long does it typically take? How long does each stage take? What are the gates before and after each stage? What kind of activities happen during that? And then after testing these operating systems for almost 30 years in a lot of different businesses, I knew which ones worked for which part. And then I overlaid those on top, and then I overlaid why they fail on top of that. And then I put in this research I did where I interviewed the Navy SEALs and the first fighting wing of the Air Force and CIA and smoke jumpers and SWAT teams and all kinds of people to understand how they handle urgent situations that come up and come outside of plan, right? Because it's one thing to plan something. It's like Tyson said, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face. And that's
Right.
foundership every single day, almost every hour, right? So you have to understand how to react in that. So the first thing was give them the timeline. Because when you're starting a business, you have to know two things: where you are and where you're going, right? It's like a GPS, and you follow your GPS. Then after that, you have to understand what is supposed to be happening at those places and what timeline are they supposed to be happening. Just like your GPS, right? Turn here, right? In 5 minutes, turn here. Oh, you're going to need to charge or fill up with electricity here. Oh, there's a detour. We're going to go this way now. Whatever it is, right? And so that's your plan. But you have to understand how to handle situations that happen, like what happens when you get a traffic jam or somebody has an accident or there's a flood or, oh, the freeway shut down at that moment, right? So how do you handle the unpredictable things that happen during the cycle of following your plan? And so the two of those together are, all those things together are BOSS, the business operating support system. And startup science is because, the art is coming up with the idea. The science is executing on your idea. When I studied this, it's always the same pattern. People follow the same. There's a way that you go about this that works, and there's ways that it doesn't work. And when I study the data on why, when, and how they fail over 5 years, it becomes extremely obvious. Like you see these, like if they were line graphs, you would see these like super dark, thick line graphs where everybody is failing for the same reasons over and over and over again. So what I did is I said, well, if I can just make it so that they don't fail for the same reasons, which is the majority of the time, but they fail for other reasons, then I can change the failure rate from maybe 90% to like 80% or even 70% or even 50%. And what would that do? It would take all of these people out of check to check living, leveling income inequality and wealth inequality. It would also change the world because these people are solving the problems that we experience. They are these people are should be cherished, right? I mean, we didn't have electric cars until Elon Musk did that, right? Now everybody's making electric cars. Solar wasn't even a big thing until Solar City, until he did Solar City. Batteries in your home, never even heard of those until Tesla Powerwalls came out. Nobody was using computers the way they are now until Apple did that deal with HP to create the mouse. And then Microsoft came on board and they did all these things. And so what has changed our life are founders, entrepreneurs, people that are doing startups. The big corporates, they don't innovate anything. In fact, most of them outsource it now to startup accelerators. They've just given up because they just can't. They don't have the mindset for it. So by doing this, I feel like I can help founders succeed. And by helping founders succeed, I help a whole bunch of other things that I was trying to do when I went into politics. And when you have founders out there that are solving these problems, they're tackling problems that they care about. You have to have a passion for something as a founder. Otherwise, you just won't be able to make it because it's like you're getting your ass kicked every day.
Yeah. Speaking of that, Gregory, that getting their ass kicked, what are those 3, 4, 5 big reasons that you have found that startups fail?
It sort of looks like a tree, right? So at the top of the tree, you have all the branches and leaves, and that's what everybody sees in their reports. But it's all bullshit. What it actually is, it all goes down to the roots underneath the ground. And at the tips of those roots are the catalyst of most of these mistakes. And it starts with bad advice, which results in bad decisions, which result in, errors along the way in multiple different, root channels, right? So, it's really, when you look at the data, I've gotten into so many arguments with investors and mentors and people like that, because they look at the data and I'll be like, bad decisions is the one that comes up all the time. They made a bad decision. Like you track down the whole thing, right? You track it all the way down to the beginning using root cause analysis or the 5 whys, the TPS 5 whys. And then you find quickly, you're like, oh, this point right here, they made a horrible decision. And everybody like stops there and they go, okay, bad decision on that one. And I'm like, wait a minute, why did they make a bad decision? They didn't have the experience, right? So how did they make a bad decision? Did they just pull it out of their, or did they actually get some advice? And when you interview the founders, you find out almost every single time they got some advice. So then I'm like, okay, who's giving the advice? What's happening underneath that? Like, who's giving the advice? Well, the majority of the time it was investors. So then I'm like, okay, who are the investors and what do they know? And in every case that I looked at, the investors had never done a startup before. They had their objectives were different than the founders' objectives. So they were trying to move the business in the direction that they think it should go from their lens and their experience working with founders, but never have been one. So it's one thing for somebody to be an armchair critic and watch football, and it's another one to get in the game and play football, and they have different perspectives, right? And that was the number one bad advice catalyst.
Well, that's interesting. Greg Head, who, my friend who I introduced you to, and hopefully you'll be on his Practical Founders podcast, an excellent show. That Greg has been in the tech world forever, his entire career. He's a remarkable marketer, and he talks about at Scaling Point, his company, about, maybe you don't need VC funding. Maybe you don't need that investor chirping in your ear. There are other ways to grow your company, and maybe that's as a practical founder. So does that kind of play in a little bit to what you're talking about? That if you're bootstrapping this, you don't have to rely on those investors chirping in your ear, giving you bad advice?
Yeah. It's for sure. The first, 10 I did or so were all bootstrapped. And when I started to work with investors is when I started to have huge amounts of stress. And, you're trying to argue with them, but they don't see your perspective. So you're like, well, I think we should do this. And they go, no, we need to do this. And you're like, they're not even on the phone calls. They don't feel the business, feel it, feel the way it feels, like the way you feel your body, your health, you're tired some days, the business is just like that. It has moods and it has feelings and it has stress, and the whole thing sort of works like one organism. And investors don't understand that. So they tell you to make bad decisions all the time. They give input that's just horrible. And they want to put more money in when it's doing well, so you take over unnecessary money. They want to grow the way their portfolio looks, so they do things at higher valuations. That's why you see this last market crash. All those companies that have been diving down from, let's just pick on one of them, the grocery shopping one, right? Instacart. So they dropped from 36 million to 13. Well, they were at 13 the whole time. But the investors wanted it to be at 36 because they make 2 and 20 on the overrides, right? So there's it's like trying to say that the person trying to sell you a house or a car is on your side. No, bullshit. They get a percentage of the commission. How is that even possible? It's not even possible, right? So it's just a misaligned thing from the very beginning, right? The only thing you both have in line is that you want to sell your business. And you want to sell it for a lot of money. But they care about how much money they get, and you care about how much money you get out of that. So even that is a broken misalignment. The next one is mentors, believe it or not, like advisors, mentors, consultants. So most of these people go into accelerators, and some accelerators are really good, but about 51% of them, of the founders, fail within a year of leaving accelerators. So I was like, okay, well, what's going on? Like, why are they failing right after leaving the accelerator? So I went through 2,167 accelerators and interviewed them, and I asked their applications, and I asked them, what they taught and all this, their curriculum, and I learned all this stuff. And what I learned is that one of the things they do in order to help the founders is they get what they call mentors. And mentors come in and they're supposed to help them out. But what I found out is that if you are doing a biotech startup and you get a tech mentor, that's not going to work for you, right? So there's an alignment between the mentor and the vertical, the industry that you're working in, that is critical to your success. There's a difference between a doctor and a lawyer, right? So why would you go to a mentor that's not even in your space? They have a struggle to get mentors. That's why they have a huge struggle. The mentors are usually trying to get consulting agreements. So the mentors come in and they're offering them free advice because it's basically an interview to get a consulting job, whether it's a lawyer getting a retainer or an accounting firm or just some sort of a consultant. And it's okay, but it needs to be at the right time again, right? Like I said before, if you have an early stage startup person who specializes in vision, they're really good for vision, but they're not going to be good for your go-to-market. Or if they're good for your go-to-market, are they going to be the same person that you use for exit strategy or your financials or anything else in the thing. So it has to do with the vertical and what stage you're at. So you should be moving from mentor to mentor to mentor, depending on who's the right vertical and whatever stage you're at that time. And extremely leery about people doing things for free, right? People don't do things for free out of the goodness of their heart very often. They do, but it's rare, not at volume anyway, right? But this entire industry has a bunch of people, quote unquote, doing things for free at scale. So what gives? Well, what gives is they're all trying to make money from the founders. Therefore, their advice is also tinted towards their own objectives. It's just human nature, right? So what you see this founder coming in, doesn't know anything, starts taking advice from mentors, start taking advice from investors, they take advice from each other, and all this sort of thing. And some of the mentors are like one-hit wonders. They did one deal and now they know everything, and maybe they just caught a wave coming in or something. They've never been through anything. They're from a wealthy family. They got a big round right away because they had some hookup because of somebody they knew in university, whatever. And then they use those people too. And those people are a lot of the times are trying to help out of the goodness of their heart, but they don't have the experience to really help this founder. And they will rarely, if ever, say, I don't know about that, let me get back to you. It makes them look bad. So they always just kind of, sometimes it's just straight bullshit going through it. And
so the first two reasons then are all about advice, getting bad advice, taking bad advice that lead to bad decisions.
Yeah.
What's number 3?
The number 3 is overvaluation. So they'll come in but this is all a catalyst of the bad. Everything drops down from bad advice, like every single part of it. So, they'll do something like come in and then they'll take a valuation that the VC thinks they should get, or the angel. Oh, you're doing another round. Oh yeah, you need to go up 20%. You need to go up 20%. You keep going up 20%. Now all of a sudden you find out you're overvalued. And like I said earlier, that's where we are now. You see all these companies dropping in value because the investors wanted them to keep raising the value because of the way that they're paid. There's 2 types of motivation, right? Intrinsic motivation, like playing a sport or playing a board game or loving your children. Extrinsic motivation, money, fear, power, things like that, right? Carrot and stick is external motivation. And most of the people involved are externally motivated, but the founder is usually internally motivated. They want to solve a problem. So the founder doesn't understand because everybody that's talking to them is telling them they're on the same page and they're doing the same thing. But as soon as that company gets overvalued, everybody disappears and the founder's left holding the bag. Same thing with the business across the board. So I have this massive amount of empathy and sympathy for the founders, and I'm trying to help the founders, get educated so that they can, handle this on a level playing field.
I was going to ask you, what advice do you give them to avoid bad advice?
To learn it on their own. Instead of ask somebody, go out and learn. And when I say learn, I don't mean like read a couple of articles. Because when I was doing the research, that's why I've created the schools, to help them, and I'll be giving away the classes in GregoryShepard.com here in a couple of months in June. But if, what you find is you find a new founder coming in, doesn't know anything, and they take advice. And then they start acting on that advice. So if you talk to another person, you get another piece of advice, which is different. And then you get another piece, and you don't know which one is which, right? And sometimes their advice is based on some article they read, because I ran into this, right? It's like quicksand. I read an article doing the research, which referred to 3 other articles. So now you read those 3 articles, which refer to 3 other articles. And pretty soon you get to the end of it, and it's just some guy that made it up. So you're like, or it comes to some report, and you're like, okay, how many people, what was the sample size of the report? Where was it done? What vertical was it in? All that sort of stuff. So a lot of the stuff out there is just not good advice. It's just not good, right? And it's either not good because it was fabricated in the first place, or it's not good because it wasn't fit for that entrepreneur in that particular situation. And entrepreneurship on the art side, which is the idea and the vision, is something that's in somebody's head. You're not going to go out and find that somewhere else, or somebody else would have already done it. The part of it that's a science is something you follow. You follow a process, and it's like if you're a doctor, you find a diagnosis. There's common solutions for that diagnosis, and you take those solutions and you keep moving down. And that's how I choose. It's more of a science. In reality, it's really a science. And if you follow that protocol instead of like somebody telling you what they think you should be doing at that moment, you have way better success. I mean, substantially better success. And you do it in half the time.
And you're sharing it from your own experience, from having built several startups, very impressive exits, and now you're helping these people do the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, when let's say that you're jogging down a trail, and every morning you go down, you jog down a trail, and there's this one little pothole, and you run down, the person in front of you falls in and twists their ankle. And you're like, oh man. And the next person falls in. I mean, how many times are you going to let that happen? Before, when somebody's running in front of you, you go, hey, watch that pothole, right? That's foundership for the whole time, right? There's constantly things to trip over and fall into, and mud and water, and it's a minefield. So the founders usually don't know that they're in one, let alone where they are. They could be standing on one and not even knowing about it. So I try to tell them where they are, how to avoid them, how to think differently, so that you're processing the information in a different way than the other people that are trying to give you advice are thinking about it, and give you the notification ahead of time. Hey, there's a pothole up ahead. So in the courses we say, this many founders fail because of this. So pay attention, right? And then we tell them what to do. We say, this is what you can do. If you do this, you're not going to have this problem. You'll have a different problem, but not this one. And this is the most common one. It's not about solving all the problems. It's about solving 80% of the problems.
And when does your course begin, or is it up and running now?
Yeah, they're up and running now. I mean, we have like 36 universities and accelerators using it.
Is it an online course?
Yeah, they're all like, we studied this, right? We found that we had to create watch, listen, read, and experience, because those are the different ways people learn, including neurodivergent people and immigrants. And then on top of that, we put in a whole pathway. So it's like, okay, I have an idea. Well, there's a whole course on why entrepreneurs fail. And then there's pieces of that throughout it. And then in addition to that, we made it so that they're like 8 minutes long. The longest ones are 8 minutes long. We had them like 30 minutes, even 45 minutes. But then when we put founders in front of machines and watched them, they had, the attention span was like a fruit fly. I mean, it's like 8 minutes at the tops, right? It's 6 minutes is probably primary. So we cut them up into 6 to 8 minute courses. So they're micro learning. So they can move through them real quickly. They can keep track of where they were. And as they're doing this, as they're taking the classes and doing the practicum, meaning doing the experience part of it, they're actually building a profile that they can share with investors. So, or accelerators or whatever. So the whole thing was meant to really, really change the process of a founder. I mean, we did this experiment where we put down a whole table of computers, and they were brand new founders, right? They had never done a business before. And you put them in front of the computers, and then you say, okay, how would you find out what to do as an entrepreneur? And you see them, and they don't even know what keywords to type in. And then when they find the keywords, they start hunting these things down, right? Like you do anytime you're doing research. And in that process, we realized that we had to make this thing, the courses shorter, and we had to lead the horse to water. We had to tell them, like, this is what you need to learn first. This is what you need to learn second. And then we ran into some problems because you have these more experienced founders saying, oh yeah, I'm experienced, I don't need to learn that. But the reason why those guys are failing is because they didn't learn those things before. Even second, third, fourth time founders, still failing from not the same reasons they failed before, but from different reasons, right? So, you really start to say, okay, well, I need to start teaching these guys the whole pathway and every step along the way, and that's what we created. And then we started to pull in the whole startup ecosystem. So there are thousands and thousands of different pieces of software and services and things that you need to get a business going. So we put all those in there, and we put ratings in there so that the founders can actually rate them real, sort of like Amazon. So we can go back to people and say, okay, your software sucks, we're taking it out, or whoa, they really like this one, or whatever.
And people can find your course at GregoryShepard.com.
Yeah, GregoryShepard.com. It'll launch in June. It's called Visionaries by GregoryShepard.com, and it's supposed to go with the book. So when the book is sold, because there's so much more than you can put into a 250-page book. I'm doing 5 books, but even that is not enough, and it's all reading or audiobook. And
But you said that the course is already up and running in some places, like in universities and accelerators. This will be more of a public course for others
this
to
one
come
is
in and do?
different because, people charge for it in some places and stuff. So I'm trying to create something that is easier access for people that, don't have money and are trying to get off the ground.
Yeah, I'm kind of doing the same thing right now, Gregory. Most of my work is like you saw at Ace Tech with working with large organizations. In fact, this week I'll be out in Virginia working with McCormick, the big spice company, a half-day training session for a lot of their sales and marketers there and whatever. And then I've got TDK, the cassette tape, I just think of them as the cassette audio tape company from way back when they do so much more. But I've had so many people like your startups that say, man, how can I take your mastery course? And I'm now doing a public version of that, just 25 seats available. They take that online course now, and then I do some live training sessions starting June 1, and then follow up again on June 7th for that very reason. Make it very affordable that they can get in. 25 seats available so that we can keep it intimate and I can work with each and every person there. But that same sort of concept, and you saw the training at Ace Tech, and you know how powerful using that ABT can be, and it's just how can I get it in the hands and in the minds of more people?
Yeah. I mean, when I started trying to help founders, I was doing it one-to-one like that, right? So I would go to universities and stuff, and I couldn't help enough of them. There would be too many. I would go do a speaking event at some university, and I have like 150 kids waiting to talk to me, and I was like, I can't do this. So I had to create a one-to-many program, and that's where I came up with it. I was like, oh, I can do a whole bunch at the same time in an 8-minute class that everybody can take in any form of reading, writing, listening, or doing that they want, and the information can stick, and I can do a whole bunch at one time, and I could really affect, the thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of founders around the world that are solving real problems that they're experiencing. Like, if you look at some of the poorest areas of the world, they are coming up with solutions for their own problems. Some of the dirtiest areas of the world, they're coming up with solutions to their own problems. These people are motivated to solve the problems they live in. And those people, you can't access one-to-one. You have to access one-to-many, time zones and what kind of internet they have, and 5 people sharing one computer, or them having to go somewhere to do it or whatever. That's why I went with the route I went with, because I can help more people at the same time.
So let's wrap with your 5 principles. Now, I think we can all agree that you were dealt quite a hand at birth, and have dealt with a lot of things growing up with the different with the different labels, I guess they gave you from what you had to work through.
Yeah. I saw you struggling for that. That's funny. If people are always afraid of offending us, I think it's hilarious.
Yeah, well, I wasn't really sure what the right thing was to say there.
Yeah,
the blessings you got, but a lot of people that don't have those look at it and go, man, that's really, really hard, and yet you have been able to not just overcome them, you have excelled in the business world, in the coaching world, in the speaking world by leveraging these special superpowers that you've got. And in your TED Talk, which is excellent, you talk about these 5 principles. Can you quickly go through those for our listeners here?
Yeah, it's focus, drive, enthusiasm, discipline, and optimism. So the first one is focus, right? If you can't focus on one thing at a time, you're going to have a lot of problems. So you have to master focus. And it's very hard if you're neurodivergent to focus. For a lot of people with ADHD and ADD and that sort of stuff, autism, we can focus. Like, I can sit down for 17 hours on one thing without even moving. But so that's one, focus, and then drive. Drive is the ability to have something to look forward to, like something that you're trying to do. That's the intrinsic motivation. Fake drive is extrinsic motivation. Like, I want to make money. Money is an outcome. It's not a goal. So you choose to do something that results in money, and so you're driven to that, right? So enthusiasm is something that you absolutely have to have. If you don't have enthusiasm, you're not getting other people excited about whatever it is that you're doing. And in order to get past the gatekeeper, the crocodile brain at the front of the brain, you have to surprise the brain and give it something exciting. Otherwise, they're not going to pass it to the back of the brain where the decisions are actually made. So that's the focus, drive, enthusiasm. Now, optimism is the biology of hope. If you're not optimistic about something that's coming or something that's, you're done, right? I mean, you have to be optimistic, especially as a founder, right? You have to be optimistic. If you are sick, you have to be optimistic. If you're an underdog and you got stuff you have to deal with, you have to be optimistic. And so optimism is like, you're done if you can't find optimism. So, you think about optimism, focus, drive, enthusiasm. Well, what if all of those things fail? That's discipline. So the last one, the pinky and the handful, which is the 5 fingers, is discipline. But that's the linchpin, right? Those are the days like this morning where I get up and I'm like, oh, it's Monday morning. But you get up early. I do my cold dip in ice water. I do my yoga. I do my breathing. I do my meditation. And then I get my ass in here at 6 a.m. and start working. And, that's discipline, right? Those times when you don't want to do something or when you're supposed to run that day or work out and you're like, oh, I don't want to do it. Those are the times that it matters the most. And that's where discipline comes in. So the things that I do where I take on the impossible, that's where I'm like honing my discipline. I'm sharpening my saw, right? So when it comes time, I can do it. Because there are times when you're like when I was swimming the marathon where, it's early in the morning. I don't want to go in the ocean. The water's like 45, 50 degrees. You have a wetsuit on, but the water goes right down the wetsuit and you are cold. I mean, and then you got to swim, like 4,000 meters, like 2 miles, 2.5 miles. And then there's seaweed hitting you in the face and wildlife and who knows what's underneath you. And I'm scared out of my friggin' mind. And I still go out and do it. That's discipline, right? So it's when everything else fails, you pull that discipline card and you go out, and it's beyond you. It's not you. I always think of it as like somebody else, like the second me saying, all right, get your ass up and go do this. This is when it counts. It doesn't count when it's easy. It counts when it's hard. It's like somebody giving you $1 when they have millions or somebody giving you $1 when they have 5, right? It's a different type of inside. It's something different inside. And so for me, the discipline is the linchpin. Like that's extremely important because, the other things like focus, drive, enthusiasm, and optimism are things that you experience when you're doing something. But when you aren't even in the mood or you just can't seem to get yourself to the level to do that, discipline is where you force yourself to do it even when you don't want to. The other ones happen when you want to. So to me, the discipline one is a really big one. And my first experience with discipline was just, I think just going to school when I knew I was going to get beat up, just leaving the front door, knowing I was going to get beat up on the way to school and leaving school, knowing I was going to get beat up on the way home. The second big experience was just trying to graduate from high school. I barely graduated from high school. And the third one was the Navy. And then after the Navy, it just never stopped. Working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Honestly, I would sleep on the security guard job, take naps, and then stuff like that. But, that takes discipline, to go from, I would change in the car, go to my next job, change in the bathroom, go to my next job, just constantly. And not to give up takes discipline, on the days when you don't feel optimistic and you don't feel, you don't have any of that enthusiastic motivation. So I think that the handful are really important. I think of it's a handful of things that you need, and those things will give you what you want.
I love it. Well, Gregory, I can't thank you enough for being here. I really appreciate your time and your wisdom today and taking us through what you've gone through. It's a great success. Really waiting to hear about folks that go over to your trainings over at GregoryShepard.com. And that's Gregory Shepard, SHEPARD.com.
Yeah,
I'll also have a link in the show notes as well, so people can check that out and start looking and taking your courses. Do you have to be a startup or an entrepreneur to do this? Or
No,
could a
it's
regular
interesting.
business person just go through it?
Yeah, we have a lot of business people that go through. And I mean, look, the startups are like the Navy SEALs of business, right? I mean, they are, especially if you've done it a bunch of times, you are a war-torn veteran of business at a level that corporate business has never even thought could be possible, right? The challenges they take are big wars, and we take on battles, and I think that a lot of times we have business people, consultants, and higher level executives and stuff go into the courses, and they learn the most because usually they went to school and learned the old school, university MBA stuff, which is like, how much of that I don't even know how much of that you would even use, but, and then they come in and they go, oh man, this is something I could do right now. Oh, I could use this right now. I could use that right now, and there's a lot of stuff that mixes some of these operating systems. So some of it has a little bit of 4DX in there. Sometimes it has a little Six Sigma or OKRs or, whatever. And so we use tools from project manager like SWATs and RACIs, and we use tools for the military like wargaming, and so they get in there and it opens up like a whole new world of like, whoa. And then they go back to their office and change, try to change things. Some of them get frustrated because they realize, oh my, this is insane. I'm on a treadmill going nowhere. And then they start companies. And sometimes if they're with the right business, they're able to change things for the better. It was hard for me at eBay. I'll tell you that. It was really hard.
Well, they're learning from one of the best. So, again, man, thanks so much for taking the time. I thoroughly enjoyed meeting you up in Whistler. And this has just been an added blessing to that, to learn more about you and what you do and share this with our audience out there. So thank you, Gregory.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate you having me on here. It's an honor, and I learned a lot from you and did on this call as well. And, I can't wait to dig deeper into what you do. It's something I've never even gone into. So I'm really excited about. Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for your time.
Well, I'm excited for you to take my course too, and then give me some feedback. Maybe my videos are too long. I don't know, but I've been getting really good feedback. The course is under an hour long. I've got 3 20-minute or less modules to take people through the primary, secondary, and tertiary build of the ABTs, and the testimonials I get are really, really great.
I mean,
so
it might be more engaging, so they might be willing to sit through 20 minutes because it's not like some of the stuff that we do courses on, like ownership and valuation. It could be pretty freaking boring, right? So somebody sits through that for 20 minutes, it feels like 4 hours.
Well, thanks again. I want to thank all of our listeners and viewers for tuning in to this episode of The Business of Story. If you like what you heard, and I mean, how could you not? Gregory is just so full of wisdom about business in general, let alone the startup community. If you liked what you heard, share this episode with friends and family and colleagues out there, people that want to really build their business. And like I asked that question of Gregory, I don't think you've got to be a startup entrepreneur to take advantage of his wisdom. So go and check it out at GregoryShepard.com. I'm going to go and dive into some of his courses there myself. And of course, if I can be of service to you, come on over to The Business of Story. As I mentioned earlier, I've got the public mastery course up and running. You'll take the online course right now through the end of, you can have it forever, but we will then be doing our live training June 1st and June 7th. That's 2023, knowing that this is evergreen content. Want you to know the urgency of it now. We only have 25 spots left. I think a lot of those have already been taken. So if you're interested, check it out over at businessofstory.com, and you can apply it to your world in every way, whether you're an entrepreneur, startup, or a business person, and you want your messages to land right the first time, every time, in a very complex, very noisy world. Learn how to use the and, but, therefore. These 3 words will blow your mind, will revolutionize how you communicate, and make you a more confident, persuasive, and influential communicator. Check it out at businessofstory.com. And until next week, when we will have another amazing story artist right here for you, like Gregory, remember that the most potent story you'll ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make sure that is epic. Thanks so much for watching and listening. Take care.